In this Like a Dragon Ishin video, I'll discuss the game's different story beats and features to determine whether it's right for you or not. Like a Dragon Ishin is a remake of the same PlayStation game which was released in Japan back in 2014. This iteration not only includes visual upgrades, but also character and trooper card changes. If you're a huge fan of the Yakuza series or you've been wanting to get into Ishin to understand what makes it special, then this video is for you. This is a sponsored post. Please note sponsored posts are only sponsoring coverage. Our opinions on the game are our own and not affected by any business relationships with developers or publishers. In Like a Dragon Ishin, you play as a great samurai in the 1860s. Right from the start, you get a sense of the fate that awaits the prestigious military group as their influence and relevance begin to dwindle due to the political and social changes of the Edo period. Civil war is brewing and black ships from the west have begun infiltrating Japan, ushering in a new age of reform in its culture. As with the rest of the Yakuza games, Ishin's story plays a pivotal role in creating an immersive experience. For instance, the narrative realistically unfolds before your very eyes, with characters struggling as a result of what's happening around them. Business isn't always booming since the competition is tight. And then you have the main character who's based on two actual samurais of the same name, specifically Sakamoto Ryoma and Saito Hajime. You play as this talented fighter who goes on a hunt to find out his adoptive father's killer, all while getting into different and even strange circumstances that the Yakuza series is famous for. You'll most probably end up laughing hard, as I did, teary-eyed at times out of sympathy, and determined to become the fairest samurai there is. Combat-wise, you get to seamlessly switch between different playstyles. All in all, there are 4 classes you can experiment with, and each of them is distinguishable in terms of the weapons you wield and the combos you execute. Thematic to the game's setting, you can even wield a revolver as part of the West's influence in the evolving society of Japan. Playing the other Yakuza games before dipping your feet into Like a Dragon Ishin is not necessary, but if you've already tried some of them out, you'll recognize that some characters have reprised their roles here, making for a nice Easter egg. For example, famous protagonist Goro Majima from Yakuza 0 makes his way as the supporting character Okita Soji, one of the captains of the special police force known as the Shinsengumi. In terms of missions, you'll come across side quests or sub-stories which can be momentous and sometimes ridiculous. There are simply enough stories for every type of audience. For instance, you can form a bond with a filthy cat simply by cleaning him up in the bathhouse, and you can also choose to help an udon owner by serving as a temporary udon cook yourself. Don't worry, no formal training is necessary. Despite the seriousness behind the decreasing relevance of the samurai in society, the game successfully injects absurdity into the overall narrative through these side quests. What's more is that some of these sub-stories have corresponding mini-games where you press a series of buttons to sing beautifully in a karaoke bar, or perform a dance to your heart's delight in order to entertain various guests. Even if you're a renowned samurai out for revenge, you must make time for these crazy adventures. Oftentimes, I ended up spending hours just doing these activities to improve my relationships with people and animals. After completing sub-stories and mini-games in specific parts of town, you'll be rewarded with virtues, which in effect also raises your rapport. Virtues are another form of currency that can then be exchanged for blessings and shrines to further improve your performance, and other side hustles like catching fish, cooking gourmand dishes, and harvesting more produce. What makes Like a Dragon Ishin consistently interesting is the introduction of gameplay mechanics at a steady pace rather than overwhelming the player with a bunch of information and tutorials at the beginning. Because of this, you'll constantly want to keep progressing in the game in anticipation of what's next. Just like the sub-stories themselves, there will always be something for you to be excited about in this remake. For instance, you first get acquainted with the basics of each of the 4 classes, namely the Brawler, Swordsman, Gunman, and Wild Dancer, and how to upgrade their respective abilities before knowing more about the Trooper cards. Let's first talk about these different playstyles. With the Brawler, you primarily stick with your bare fists and even pick up objects scattered in the environment to then use against your opponents. But with the Swordsman, you'll stick with katanas to parry attacks more effectively and quickly strike targets at point-blank range. Meanwhile, the Gunman is best suited for players who prefer to pick off enemies from a distance, whereas the Wild Dancers for those who prefer to excel in both melee and ranged combat. Out of all of them though, the Swordsman feels the most balanced when it comes to defending yourself swiftly and dealing devastating blows. Comparatively, more work could have been done to improve Ryoma's speed, aim, and firing capabilities when wielding the revolver, so it doesn't feel fluid enough to warrant multiple uses. Encounters that raise your level grant Soul Orbs, which are further divided into Training and Style Orbs. Training Orbs are used to unlock the abilities of any of the 4 classes, whereas Style Orbs are obtained based on the playstyle you often gravitate towards and can therefore only be allocated to their corresponding skills. The better your attack, defense, and technique combos in combat are, the higher your experience points and Soul Orbs will be. Although character progression is quite fast in terms of gaining orbs necessary to improve your skills, it takes a while to truly master each class. There are a lot of buttons pertaining to combos which you will need to memorize for one playstyle alone that it's sometimes confusing, so it's not uncommon to keep using the same abilities as long as you defeat your enemies. Thankfully, only a small number of fights in the game will shoehorn you into a specific playstyle, so you can focus on the one that truly works for you. Besides the orbs, the rewards or loot you gain isn't as generous as in other action-adventure games. Because of this, it takes a while to craft better gear since not all materials can be bought from merchants. So you're not incentivized to fight to upgrade your weapons and armor, but instead, it's more about enhancing your active and passive abilities. When it comes to combat, Like a Dragon Ishin follows the same free-flowing structure as the main Yakuza games, thereby allowing you to mash your opponent's brains out using your hardened fist, sharp blade, powerful firearm, or a combination. This beat-em-up game is over the top, often emphasizing every move you and your enemies make, so not only is it exciting and full of action, but it's also funny to the point of absurdity. With your heat action, which is represented by an energy bar that can be filled up when executing multiple moves, you're able to finish opponents where sometimes their guts tend to spill on the floor. However, more often than not, they'll continue to live in a comedic turn of events. They may even request that you join their team as a trooper should you accept. However, Ishin's combat may feel repetitive at times, especially the random encounters against outlaws and bandits because of how frequently they occur. This is in comparison to specialized dungeon crawling activities or battle dungeons that you can choose to participate in whenever you want, as well as engaging in challenging boss fights. Sometimes they'll even push you to your limits since you'll need to fully understand and react to your enemy's patterns well before moving in for the kill, otherwise you'll end up perishing at their hands. Aside from the available classes, you'll also be able to mix and match trooper cards, which provide temporary buffs and heals for Ryoma. These are a representation of your army, so you have control over them. As such, you can freely edit and even promote troopers to make them more effective in fights. Unlike in the original game, however, you can use them outside of battle dungeons, meaning they're valuable in other types of combat encounters. Not only do these cards boost your HP, but they also provide additional abilities to effectively silence and put down your enemies. As a renowned samurai in the Like a Dragon universe, you'll eventually get to own a second home, otherwise known as another life. Here you'll get to live a life of serenity since you're in charge of cooking your own meals, harvesting vegetables, and conducting business transactions to earn more money. It's another nice touch to the already numerous minigames you are already participating in, since the house is something you essentially manage. You can also minimally customize it by trading in virtues for specific blessings. Final thoughts. Like a Dragon Ishin is an action-adventure beat-em-up that's a worthy remake, encouraging new and old players to revisit the gameplay elements that the Yakuza series excels in. Despite its linear storytelling, history creatively meets fiction in this larger-than-life game, where you lead a double life as an exemplary fighter and multi-talented guy with a heart of gold. Well, sort of. Ishin isn't really open world in the way that we know it like in The Witcher 3 or Skyrim, but in no way does it detract from providing you with a truly immersive experience in Japanese culture, making you want to explore the traditional towns more and more. From developing relationships with different merchants to trying out multiple livelihood activities to survive and get by, the game doesn't fall short of delivering an exciting tale consisting of twists and turns. Although there are points for improvement in terms of how firearms work and increasing the drop rate of materials used for crafting, Ishin rises from the rest due to its impactful and meaty combat, as well as its well-written narrative with a set of intriguing characters that'll leave a lasting impression on you. The game simply has enough activities to dive into for a whole lot of players, leaving you with multiple options to keep yourself immersed for hours on end. If you're interested to pick up this title, become the samurai you were born to be, remember to use the links below to support the channel. Well, now I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Like a Dragon Ishin? Have you played it already? Is it something that you enjoy? What do you like most about the game? Let us know in the comments below.